This is Nicole Hunt, and you are experiencing the digital presentation of my research paper, Mean Girls as Equipment for Living. Everything I learned it from the movies. This is a quote by actress Audrey Hepburn. In my opinion, it validates the ability of film writers and producers to blend life lessons or other valuable information into their scripts. Film is not the first aspect of arts to take this path, but it is by far the most far-reaching. Movies are written, produced, and then distributed worldwide to audiences of every possible background. Rather than just provide a source of entertainment, movies take real-life situations and offer viewers a plausible, or maybe even sometimes not so plausible, response to those scenarios. They are presented with characters who appear to be just like them, participating in everyday, normal activities. Viewers then subconsciously examine their own lives and internally determine how valid the lesson at hand might be. You might be asking, why choose Mean Girls? As someone who held a permanent seat at the cool kids table during high school, I am interested in how individuals, particularly teenagers, define themselves in groups and how they use these self-definitions to help and sometimes hurt other people. Who draws the lines in the sand? Who decides what the status quo is? As a former popular kid and an occasional mean girl, I'm interested to find out how my experience shaped my life to this point and how my actions may have affected the lives of others. I think that Mean Girls provides equipment for living not only for high school students, but also for adults who need to understand the importance of tolerance and openness with individuals who are different from themselves. In case you've never had the privilege of experiencing this awesome movie, let me give you a brief overview of the film. Katie is a previously homeschooled 16-year-old. She starts her junior year of high school. Her zoologist parents raised her in Africa. She is met by a world different from anything she's ever experienced. She has trouble processing the normal day-to-day actions that some of her fellow students and even teachers seem to take. In hopes to better socialize her, she meets two misfits, Janice and Damien, and they take her under their wing. They give her the 411 on where to sit, who to talk to, and most importantly, who to avoid. In doing this, she is introduced to Regina George, the leader of a clique they've not so affectionately named the Plastics. Katie undertakes the task of bringing down Regina George. The movie is largely spent with Katie becoming more and more like her nemesis and less like her original self. There's the usual climax where everyone finds out the truth and anarchy ensues, and Katie is left ostracized by everyone, even her real friends. Ultimately, she picks herself up, regroups, and begins her slow climb back to normalcy. The film ends with what the viewer can only assume is a common understanding by all the characters. We're all different in one way or another, and instead of using those differences as ammunition, we should celebrate them, respect them, and possibly use them to bring us closer. Kenneth Burke first coined the idea of equipment for living in 1973. The idea was that literature offers readers situations similar to real life that in turn cause them to think differently about their own lives. Scholars have applied this idea to storytelling media such as film. I've taken the movie Mean Girls and applied several theories within the socio-cultural tradition that seem more than fitting. For this presentation, we'll focus on two of those theories, symbolic interactionism and groupthink theory. For data purposes, we'll use certain scenes and elements from throughout the movie. With symbolic interactionism, we'll take a look at Katie receiving a social map from her new friends Janice and Ian. We'll also see her as she takes the role of being a plastic into her own and becomes this new person that you would have never thought she'd be. We'll also take a look at one of the plastics, Gretchen Wieners, and her struggle in the I-me phenomenon. With groupthink theory, we'll analyze a few of the elements of the theory: illusion of vulnerability, rationalizing, morality, stereotypes, direct pressure, self-censorship, and the illusion of unanimity. We'll do this with the two separate groups. The concept of self as a social object is originally introduced by Manfred Kuhn. According to Kuhn, humans make sense of and deal with objects through social interaction. In the beginning scenes of the film, Janice and Damien give Katie a social map of the school. The object in question is the lunchroom. According to Janice and Ian, where you sit determines who you are in the hierarchy. Katie uses the map to gain a better understanding of the students in the school. Since the self also engages in conversation or analysis internally, Katie also narrates a majority of the movie, giving the viewer insight to her personal mental journey. We hear her constantly working out the different kinks as they come along. She uses the process of naming to make sense of the new objects that she encounters on a daily basis. In terms of society, we'll take a look at George Mead's focus on gestures and the meanings adapted from those gestures. In the movie, Katie walks through the lunchroom on her first day. As she moves from table to table, she receives the same nonverbal gesture. eye-rolling and dismissive hand from everyone that she considers sitting with. This gesture lets her know that the three empty seats at the table are not meant for her or anyone unlike the occupants of the table. This is what Mead calls a significant symbol. It is a gesture with a shared meaning that indicates a future course of social act. Louis Kozer commented on this reaction, saying that human communicative processes involve the constant self-conscious adjustment of factors to the conduct of others, a repeated fitting together of lines of action through definitions and redefinitions, interpretations and reinterpretations. The self can certainly be socially constructed. By not sitting at certain tables, other students silently confirmed that the plastics were somehow in authority. The plastics then took that note of perception and began to embody this persona. This is what Mead calls role-taking. Part of that role-taking involves acknowledgement of the I-me phenomenon. Stephen Littlejohn and Karen Foss describe the me as any socially acceptable and adaptable behavior, while the I is any creative, unpredictable impulses. One of the plastics, Gretchen, experiences an I-me transformation at the halfway point of the film. Gretchen is the ultimate follower. It would appear that she aims to please her fearless, heartless leader, Regina. However, as the storyline progresses, Regina begins to like Katie more and more. Gretchen's I feels left out. Her I begins to subconsciously seep through her daily actions. She openly and proudly begins to defy and question Regina's authority in the group. And although it isn't clear to the viewer, the coming out of Gretchen's I is a result of the work Katie was doing behind the scenes. By the end of the film, Gretchen's battle between who she wanted to be, the I, and who Regina would allow her to be, seemed to have reached a compromise. She found a new queen bee to serve, but she was also set free of the me persona that being a plastic required her to portray. This role reversal leads us into the theory of the mind. Mead described the mind as a process rather than a thing, and this is because humans are constantly examining themselves and their surroundings, and then they act accordingly. We review situations, consider the available responses, and at this point, sometimes the I-me phenomenon is present, and then we determine how to respond. The mind, therefore, causes the self to react to whatever object has been presented by society. This cycle continues daily, whether via physical, social, or abstract objects. Elements of Irving Janis's groupthink theory are everywhere in the storyline. From the plastics to Katie's true group of friends, everyone comes together to form a bond and go after a common goal. Janis and Damien manage to convince Katie that Regina must be stopped. In order to do so, they formulate a master plan that involves 3 steps: stealing her boyfriend, ruining her hot body, and infiltrating what they called the army of skanks, which in this instance would be the other plastics. They go about this plan over the course of the movie, and as time continues, the illusion of invulnerability starts to take over once they realize that they actually have the power to manipulate the other plastics against Regina. At one point, Katie begins to feel guilty and even tired of the charade, but Janis and Damien convince her that for the greater good of everyone, that she continue. They even remind Katie of Regina's own attempts to keep her from obtaining her own crush's affections. And just that quickly, Katie is sucked right back into their group plan. This is an overlapping example of the rationalizing of the plan and the morality of the issue at hand. The remaining elements of groupthink are seen in the plastics. Regina is viewed by all as the leader of the clique, and since the clique has a severe mean streak, Regina is appropriately given the title of the evil leader. This is a stereotype. By the movie's end, viewers see that Regina, just like everyone else, wanted to feel special. She wanted to be noticed. That does not automatically make her evil, but the course of action she chose to gain popularity does. Secondly, there is direct pressure from within the group to remain in agreement with the leader's point of view or the assumed group view. As Gretchen and Karen give Katie the do's and don'ts, it's apparent that they might not necessarily agree with the rules, but they encourage Katie to follow them. They tell her that even if she thinks she likes a certain boy, cue Aaron Samuels, Regina's boyfriend, who, on the same turn, Katie's also trying to sabotage with her groupthink with Janis and Ian. They tell her that even if she likes Aaron, she probably doesn't, and she must discuss it with the group first. The silencing of opinion collides with the self-censorship component. So as Katie begins to wear Gretchen down, the viewer can see that she has an inner battle playing out on her face and in her words. It comes to fruition in the middle of the class when she writes a paper on Caesar and Brutus. And you can tell that Gretchen is breaking down and thinking of herself as Brutus and Regina as Caesar. However, because of the rules in place, she's not allowed to speak her mind, hence the breakdown in the middle of the classroom. Things are the way they are for a reason. Finally, the result is the illusion of unanimity among the group. From the outside, other students see the plastics as a cohesive unit, whose only concern is what Prada bag or which Gucci lip gloss to use that day. As long as they're making fun of the cool Asians together, they appear to be all evil. No one is aware that on the inside, Gretchen finds them to be intriguing and fashion-forward. But thanks to Katie's eye phenomenon and constant questioning of the norms, the group is actually experiencing a great level of dissension and possibly dispersion. In terms of my own experience, defining myself in relation to others has always been interesting. After going through high school as a popular kid and entering college along with 20,000 other individuals, my self-concept changed drastically. Mead's symbolic interactionism comes into play here. My former list of descriptors included words like popular, friendly, athletic, or funny. By the time I graduated from college, I used more adult words such as educated, insightful, well-rounded, leader, driven, or things like that. Since the concept of self is socially created, as my environment changed over the course of 4 years, so did my opinion of myself. I can recall watching Mean Girls in April 2004 with my real-life plastics thinking, wow, is that what we do? And looking back, I can remember us selecting our table at the beginning of senior year. It was right next to the best lunch line, allowing us to skip in and out as we pleased. Once we climbed that table, no one would sit there unless we offered them to do so. It was known that it was our table. Our unspoken gesture of choosing a table and leaving our things on it day after day created the course of action for essentially everyone in the cafeteria. Thinking about it now, I didn't personally have an issue with other people sitting at the table. I just simply went with the flow of what our society of friends indicated was correct. In the present day, this film has shaped the way I treat other people. I was with my most recent employer for 4 years. I was part of a team that launched a new store. All the employees and I were hired at the same time, and we went through training together, forming a bond that we ended up calling ourselves the Originals. With the retail environment, though, comes massive turnover, and it's difficult to be the new person on the job or adjust to new people being on the job with you. When someone walks into a break room and sees the camaraderie between coworkers, the initial feeling is to want to be included, but, like high school, it's never really that simple. Knowing that some of my original coworkers were not as open to newcomers, I always made it a point to reach out to the new additions. So now, instead of being a plastic, I've done a little role reversal and I've taken on the Janice or Ian or Damien persona. I would give these people rules and norms of the store, tell them which employees to watch out for or which manager they needed to impress. And even if I never formed that same bond with the new employee as I had with my originals, they always knew that they were welcomed into our retail family. I do believe that the sociocultural tradition speaks volumes to the ideas of self and the self within a group. Many of these theories could be helpful in initiating talks about tolerance and openness among teenagers, and adults too. Part of the issue, I think, would be the lack of self-development. The average 16-year-old doesn't really have a firm grasp on who they are, or who those around them might be. And this leads them to seek solace within social groups or allow their identity to be determined by those who view them as different from the norm. It's kind of like the scene in the movies when the presumed ugly or nerdy girl takes off her glasses. She and everyone else had no idea she could be so pretty and awesome until she decided to define herself for herself. The acceptance of other cultures and ideas is also important at an early age and can be helpful in later years. Being around a plethora of cultures and social scenes in the last 10 years has strengthened my appreciation for those different from myself. Also, knowledge is power. People fear what they do not know or understand, so it's also important that our teenagers are acutely aware of the facts. Not necessarily everyone is a trophy-winning athlete with wealthy parents who give them everything they want. There are some in-betweens, and there are some on the other side of the spectrum. If teens were educated about things or people different from their own lives or the lives of their immediate circle, they'd be less likely to attempt socializing those who are not like them, or treating them poorly and not allowing them the same rites of passage or privilege as they themselves are taking. They may not agree with the traits or characteristics or the lifestyle of these different individuals, but they can learn to respect it for what it is. They can learn that perhaps that quirky girl who was raised in Africa isn't so weird after all. She's smart, funny, and possibly even a bit insightful.